Velna pushed her hover chair down the empty corridor of Nexus Station. The metal wheels hummed quietly against the polished floor. It was 3 in the morning, which meant most beings were asleep. This was exactly how she liked it. Her lower body had never worked properly. Born on the mining planet Korth, she came into the world with legs that would never carry her. The doctors called it a genetic malfunction. Her people called it a curse. Either way, it meant she spent her life watching others walk while she rolled. The data processing center stood at the end of Corridor 7. Night shift meant working alone with massive computer banks that stored information from across the galaxy. Trade routes, shipping manifests, communication logs, all the boring stuff that kept civilization running. Perfect work for someone the universe preferred to forget. Velna swiped her access card and entered the dimly lit room. Hundreds of screens flickered with endless streams of numbers and symbols. She settled at her workstation and began sorting through the day's accumulated data. Her 6-fingered hands moved quickly across the holographic keyboard, organizing files with practiced efficiency. Most Korthari stood nearly 8 feet tall with powerful builds suited for heavy labor. Velna barely reached 5 feet, even sitting upright. Her pale blue skin marked her as different from her darker-skinned relatives. Everything about her screamed broken to her own people. The other species on the station weren't much better. The tall, elegant Zephyrians looked right through her as if she were furniture. The 4-armed Nexari stepped carefully around her chair without making eye contact. Even the small, furry pip-folk seemed uncomfortable in her presence. But Velna had learned not to care, or at least she pretended not to care. During her scheduled break, she pulled up a personal file on her screen. While others used break time to socialize or eat, she worked on mathematics. Complex equations filled her. Display: problems involving quantum mechanics and space-time theory that most university professors would struggle with. Her mind craved these challenges, the way others craved food or companionship. Tonight she was working on a particularly interesting problem about exotic matter behavior near black holes. The equations were beautiful in their complexity, flowing across her screen like poetry written in numbers. She lost herself in the work, forgetting about her useless legs and the empty room around her. A soft chime indicated her break was ending. Velna quickly saved her work and returned to the mundane task of data sorting. File after file passed through her system. Cargo manifests from human ships, mining reports from Vectari colonies, diplomatic messages between planetary governments. The humans fascinated her most. Their data showed incredible diversity in how they approached problems. Where other species followed rigid patterns, humans seemed to find new solutions for everything. Their ships were patched together with different technologies, their crews mixed species that shouldn't work together, and somehow they made it all function. She often wondered what it would be like to talk with a human. Would they see her the same way everyone else did? Would they look at her chair first and her mind second? Or would they be different? The night stretched on quietly. Velna worked alone with only the humming of machines for company. In a few hours the day shift would arrive and she would roll back to her small quarters. Another invisible day in an invisible life. But sometimes, when she solved a particularly difficult equation, she allowed herself to imagine a different kind of existence, one where someone might actually notice what she could do instead of what she couldn't. Tomorrow would probably be the same as today, but tonight, surrounded by the endless flow of data from across the galaxy, she could dream of something more. Jiho stepped off the transport ship with his single duffel bag and looked around Nexus Station's arrival bay. The place was massive, with beings from dozens of different worlds moving in every direction. After 3 months traveling through space to get here, he was finally starting his new job as a systems engineer. The human walked through the main corridors, trying to get his bearings. Everything was built for different body types. Some doorways were 12 feet tall for the giants, others barely reached his waist for smaller species. It was like being inside a puzzle designed by someone who had never seen humans before. His supervisor had told him to report in the morning, which meant he had the whole night to explore. Most humans would probably find a bar or restaurant, but Jiho had always been curious about how things worked. He decided to check out the technical areas of the station. The data processing center caught his attention. Through the glass windows, he could see rows of computer terminals glowing in the darkness. A sign said authorized personnel only, but the door was open. He peeked inside, expecting to find the place empty. Instead, he saw someone sitting at a workstation in the back corner. The being was much smaller than most species he had encountered, with pale blue skin and what looked like a mobility chair. But what really caught his attention was the display screen. Complex mathematical equations filled the monitor. Jiho had studied advanced physics in college, and even he could barely follow what he was seeing. Whoever was working on this stuff understood theoretical science at a level that impressed him. He walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. The person at the workstation tensed up and quickly minimized the screen, switching to what looked like boring data files. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," Jiho said softly. "I'm new here and was just exploring." The being turned around slowly. She had large, dark eyes and delicate features that reminded him somehow of Earth's deep-sea creatures. Her expression was guarded, almost fearful. "You are not supposed to be in here without authorization," she said in careful, accented English. "You're right, I should go. But before I do, can I ask what you were working on? Those equations looked fascinating." Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You saw my personal files?" "Just a glimpse. It looked like quantum mechanics theory, maybe something involving exotic matter interactions." I studied physics before switching to engineering. For a moment, her suspicious expression wavered. "You understand quantum mechanics?" "Enough to recognize genius when I see it. I'm Jiho, by the way." He extended his hand in the human custom. She stared at his hand for several seconds before cautiously reaching out with her own six-fingered hand. "Velna." "Nice to meet you, Velna. Would you mind showing me what you were working on? I promise I'm not here to steal your research or get you in trouble." She studied his face carefully, as if trying to detect lies. "Why do you care?" "Because it's beautiful. Math and physics are like art to me. When I see someone working on problems that complex during their break time, I want to understand what drives them." Velna hesitated, then slowly brought her personal files back up on the screen. "It is just theoretical work, nothing practical." Jiho moved closer to look at the equations. "Are you kidding? This is incredible. You're modeling how exotic matter behaves near gravitational singularities. Do you know how many research teams across the galaxy are trying to solve these same problems?" For the first time, Velna's expression softened slightly. "You really understand what this is?" "I understand. Enough to know I'm looking at work that belongs in a university research lab, not a data processing center." "How did you learn to do this?" "I teach myself. The station library has access to scientific databases from many worlds. They spent the next hour discussing the finer points of her calculations." Jiho asked questions that showed he genuinely grasped the concepts, while Velna found herself explaining her theories with growing enthusiasm. When the conversation finally wound down, Velna looked at him with something approaching wonder. "No one has ever asked me about my work before." "That's their loss," Jiho said simply. "Would you mind if I came by again tomorrow night? I'd love to hear more about your theories." For the first time since he had met her, Velna smiled. The next evening, Jiho showed up at the data processing center with a small device in his hand. Velna was already at her workstation, but this time she didn't hide her personal research when he approached. "I brought you something," he said, placing the device on her desk. It looked like a simple black rectangle about the size of his palm. Velna picked it up carefully. "What does it do?" "It's a neural interface adapter. Human engineers developed it for people who have trouble using standard input devices. Watch this." Jiho activated the device, and suddenly holographic controls appeared in the air around Velna's chair. "You can manipulate data or equations just by thinking about them. No need to use your hands at all." Her eyes widened as she experimented with the controls. Mathematical symbols danced through the air as she moved them with her thoughts. "This is incredible. How does it work?" "It reads the electrical patterns in your brain that correspond to specific intentions. Humans have been using similar technology to help people with various disabilities for decades." Velna looked up at him. "You brought this for me? But we just met yesterday. I figured someone with your intelligence should have the best tools available. Besides, I was curious to see what you could accomplish with better equipment. Over the following weeks, their nightly meetings became routine. Jiho would finish his day shift, maintaining the station's life support systems, then head to the data center where Velna worked alone through the night. She began sharing more about Korthari science, teaching him principles that human researchers had never discovered. Your people understand energy manipulation in ways we never considered, Jiho said one night, watching her demonstrate how Korthari crystals could amplify electromagnetic fields. This could revolutionize human technology. My people do not share knowledge with outsiders, Velna replied quietly. They barely share it with me. Why not? She gestured to her chair. Because they believe weakness in the body means weakness in the mind. They think my ideas are contaminated by my condition. Jiho shook his head. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Some of humanity's greatest scientists had physical challenges. Stephen Hawking could barely move his body, but his mind understood the universe better than almost anyone. Velna had never heard of Stephen Hawking, so Jiho spent an hour telling her about the human physicist who made groundbreaking discoveries about black holes while his body slowly failed him. Her eyes filled with moisture that might have been tears. Their friendship didn't go unnoticed. During his day shifts, Jiho's human colleagues started asking questions. What's your interest in the disabled Korthari? Asked Minho, another engineer. People are starting to talk. Let them talk, Jiho replied. Velna is brilliant. Anyone who can't see that is missing out. The gossip spread beyond humans. In the station's common areas, various species whispered about the strange pair. Some wondered if Jiho was taking advantage of Velna somehow. Others speculated that he must be equally damaged to associate with someone like her. Velna heard the whispers too. One night she confronted Jiho about it. People think you are strange for spending time with me, she said. They wonder what is wrong with you. Do you want me to stop coming? No, but I need to understand why you do this. Is it because you feel sorry for me? Jiho sat down beside her workstation. Velna, do you know what I did before I came here? I worked on a boring research station cataloging stellar phenomena. The same measurements day after day, with people who thought inside the box about everything. Then I meet you. And in 3 weeks you've shown me new ways to think about physics that could change how humans understand the universe. Why would I feel sorry for someone who's teaching me things I never knew were possible? But my condition... What? About it? You get around differently than I do. So what? Your mind works better than most people I've met. That's what matters to me. For the first time since their friendship began, Velna allowed herself to believe he meant it. Not because he said the right words, but because his actions proved it every night. He came to learn from her, not to help her. He brought her tools to enhance her abilities, not accommodate her limitations. That night, as they worked together on a new theoretical framework combining human and Korthari science, Velna realized something had changed inside her. For the first time in her life, she felt valued for who she was rather than pitied for what she wasn't. The alarm started screaming at 600 hours, jolting everyone on Nexus Station awake. Red emergency lights flashed in every corridor as the automated voice announced what everyone feared most. Quantum reactor malfunction detected. All engineering personnel report to emergency stations immediately. Jiho rolled out of his bunk and threw on his uniform. In the hallway he could see other engineers running toward the central hub. The quantum reactor powered everything on the station: life support, gravity generators, atmospheric processors. If it failed completely, 50,000 beings would die within hours. The main engineering bay was chaos when he arrived. Dozens of engineers from different species crowded around holographic displays showing the reactor's status. The readings were all wrong. Energy levels fluctuated wildly, and exotic matter was cascading through the containment fields in patterns. That made no sense. Quan, the station's chief engineer, stood at the center trying to coordinate the response. The tall Vectari had 30 years of experience and commanded respect from every species on the team. His 4 arms gestured rapidly as he barked orders. Primary containment is failing, reported Suki, a human technician. We've got exotic matter bleeding into secondary systems. Gravity fluctuations in sectors 7 through 12, added Brix, the insectoid engineer. Atmospheric pressure dropping in the outer rings. Jiho studied the displays and felt his stomach drop. The exotic matter cascade was creating feedback loops that fed on themselves, growing stronger with each cycle. Unless they found a way to break the pattern, the reactor would tear itself apart. Options, Quan demanded. We could try venting the containment chambers, suggested one engineer. That would irradiate half the station, Quan replied. Emergency. Shutdown of the main core? We'd lose life support before backup generators could compensate. For 2 hours, the team threw every solution they could think of at the problem. Nothing worked. The cascade was too complex, involving quantum interactions that their standard procedures couldn't handle. Engineers who were experts in their fields stood helpless while the reactor continued its countdown to destruction. Jiho kept thinking about the exotic matter equations Velna had been working on during their late-night sessions. Her research dealt with exactly this type of quantum instability. She had spent months modeling how exotic matter behaved under extreme conditions. Sir, Jiho said, approaching Quan, I think I know someone who might have insights into this problem. Every qualified engineer on the station is already here, Quan replied without looking up from his displays. She's not officially an engineer, but she's been researching exotic matter interactions for months. Her theoretical models might show us something we're missing. Who are you talking about? Velna from the Data Processing Center. She's Korthari, and she's been working on advanced quantum mechanics theory. Quan finally looked at him. The disabled one? Jiho, this isn't time for charity cases. We need real solutions. Her work is real. She understands exotic matter better than anyone I've met. She's not qualified, she's not trained, and she's not even the same species. We don't have time for amateur theories. Jiho felt his temper rising. At least let her look at the data. What do we have to lose? Our credibility, Quan snapped. I'm not going to risk 50,000 lives on the theories of someone who processes shipping manifests. Other engineers had stopped to listen. Some nodded in agreement with Quan, while others looked uncertain. The Korthari engineer in the group remained silent, which told Jiho everything about how Velna's own species viewed her. The cascade is accelerating, Suki announced. We have maybe 4 hours before containment fails completely. Jiho made a decision that could end his career. Then, I'm going to get her anyway. You'll do no such thing, Quan ordered. Stay at your station and focus on real solutions. The real solution might be sitting in that data center right now, working on exactly the kind of problem we're facing. But we'll never know because you won't even consider the possibility that someone different from us might have answers. The room fell silent, except for the constant beeping of alarms. Quan's expression was dangerous, but Jiho pressed on. Humans learned a long time ago that the best solutions often come from unexpected places, from people who think differently, who see patterns others miss. Velna has been studying these exact quantum interactions for months while we've been focused on maintenance procedures. She's not one of us, Quan said coldly. Neither am I, technically. Neither are half the people in this room. But that diversity is what makes us strong. The exotic matter readings spiked again, and several engineers cursed in their native languages. Time was running out, and their conventional approaches had failed completely. Jiho looked around the room at faces filled with fear and frustration. We're going to die here if we don't try something different. What's more important, our pride or Ujiho didn't wait for permission. While Quan and the other engineers continued their heated debate about protocol and procedures, he slipped out of the main engineering bay. The corridors were mostly empty now, with most beings either working frantically or huddled in their quarters waiting for news. He found Velna in the Data Processing Center, staring at her screens with obvious worry. The emergency alarms had been impossible to ignore, and she knew exactly what they meant. Jiho, what is happening with the reactor? She asked as soon as she saw him. Exotic matter cascade. The containment fields are failing and we can't stop. The feedback loops. He pulled up the reactor schematics on her workstation. Look at these readings. Velna's eyes widened as she studied the data. Her hands moved quickly across the holographic interface, pulling up different views and running calculations. This pattern, I have seen something like this before. In your research? Yes, but not exactly like this. The cascade is following quantum pathways that should not be possible under normal conditions. She paused, her expression growing more intense. Unless... Show me the containment field configurations. Jiho downloaded the technical specifications. From the main engineering database, Velena absorbed the information quickly, her mind clearly racing through possibilities. The engineers are trying to stop the cascade by reinforcing the containment fields, she said after several minutes, but that is making it worse. They are creating pressure points that force the exotic matter into more unstable configurations. So, what's the solution? Do not fight the cascade, guide it. Velena began sketching equations in the air using the neural interface. If you adjust the containment fields to create specific resonance patterns, you can redirect the exotic matter flow into stable orbital configurations around the reactor core. Jiho studied her calculations. The math was incredibly complex, involving quantum mechanics principles he had never encountered. But the logic was sound. Instead of trying to contain the chaotic energy, they would channel it into predictable patterns. This is brilliant, he said, but the timing has to be perfect. One mistake and we could make the cascade worse. I know. Velena's confidence seemed to waver. Maybe I am wrong. Maybe I am just a data processor who thinks she understands things she does not. Hey. Jiho moved closer to her chair. I've seen your work for weeks. You understand exotic matter? Interactions better than anyone on this station. Trust yourself. She looked at him with uncertainty in her large eyes. But what if I am wrong? What if my condition affects my thinking in ways I do not realize? My people always said, "Your people were wrong about you," Jiho interrupted firmly. "Your condition doesn't make you less capable. If anything, it's given you a different perspective that lets you see solutions others miss. How can you be so sure? Because I've watched you solve problems that stumped me. Because your mind works in ways that produce results. Because right now, you're the only person who has an actual plan instead of just panic." Velena took a deep breath and returned to her calculations. We need to modify the containment field generators in a specific sequence. The timing must be precise down to microseconds. They worked together for the next hour, refining the solution. Velena handled the theoretical framework, while Jiho focused on the practical implementation. The plan required reprogramming 12 different field generators in a carefully orchestrated sequence. There is one problem, Velena said as they finished the calculations. This requires manual coordination. The station's computer systems are not fast enough to handle the timing requirements. So we need someone to monitor the cascade in real time and adjust the field strengths manually. Yes, someone who understands the quantum interactions well enough to recognize the patterns and respond instantly. Jiho realized what she was saying. You're the only one who can do this. But I cannot leave the data center. My mobility chair is not designed for the engineering sections. And even if I could get there, who would listen to me? Then we bring the engineering controls to you. Jiho was already planning how to reroute the control systems. I can patch the containment field controls into your workstation. You can monitor everything from here. What about the other engineers? They will not understand what we are doing. Let me worry about that. Right now, focus on being ready. When the cascade reaches critical instability, we'll have maybe 10 minutes to implement your solution. As they made final preparations, Velena's hands trembled slightly. Jiho, I am scared. If I am wrong, everyone dies because of my mistake. And, if you're right, everyone lives because of your brilliance. I'd rather bet on your mind than give up without trying. Velena nodded slowly, her expression becoming more determined. Then let us save this station. The alarms continued screaming outside, but inside the data processing center, two minds worked as one to solve a problem that had defeated dozens of trained engineers. One human who believed in unconventional solutions and one brilliant alien who was about to prove that being different was exactly what the universe needed. The reactor readings turned critical just after midnight. Jiho watched from the data processing center as Velena tracked the cascade patterns on her modified displays. Her neural interface allowed her to process the quantum data faster than any conventional system could handle. Containment field strength. Dropping to 30%, she reported, her voice tense but focused. The cascade is entering its final phase. Back in the main engineering bay, alarms screamed even louder. Jiho could hear the chaos through his communication link, engineers shouting over each other, systems failing one by one, and underneath it all, the growing desperation in everyone's voices. Primary life support just went offline in Sector 12, came Suki's panicked voice over the comm. We're losing atmospheric pressure throughout the outer rings. Kwan's voice cut through the noise. All personnel, prepare for emergency evacuation procedures. We have less than 30 minutes before total containment failure. Jiho made his choice. He opened a channel to the main engineering bay and spoke clearly into his communicator. Engineering. Team, this is Jiho. I have a solution to the cascade problem. Jiho, get back here immediately, Kwan ordered. This is not the time for unauthorized actions. Sir, I'm patching the containment field controls to the data processing center. We have a way to stop the cascade. You did what? Kwan's voice was furious. You cannot make modifications to critical systems without authorization. The modifications are already complete. Velna has calculated a solution that can redirect the exotic matter into stable configurations. The communication channel fell silent for a moment. Then Kwan's voice came back, colder than space. You brought the Kothari into this? Jiho, you've lost your mind. She's the only one who understands the quantum mechanics involved. Her calculations show exactly how to guide the cascade instead of fighting it. Jiho, came Minho's voice, the reactor core temperature just spiked another 20 degrees. Whatever you're planning, we're out of time. Velna looked up from her displays, her face pale but determined. The cascade is reaching resonance frequency. If we are going to act, it must be now. Jiho switched his communicator to broadcast mode, so everyone could hear. Velna, explain your solution to the engineering team. Her voice was quiet at first but grew stronger as she spoke. The cascade follows quantum pathways that create feedback loops. Instead of trying to contain the exotic matter, we must create resonance patterns that guide it into stable orbital configurations around the reactor core. That's theoretical nonsense, came an angry voice from the engineering bay. Exotic matter doesn't behave that way under containment conditions. It does when the containment fields are modified to create specific harmonic frequencies, Velna replied calmly. I am beginning the sequence now. Her hands moved across the neural interface, adjusting containment field generators throughout the station. On her screens, the chaotic cascade patterns began to shift as the field configurations changed. Field Generator 7 is responding, she reported, redirecting exotic matter flow to harmonic resonance. In the engineering bay, the team watched, their displays in stunned silence as the impossible began to happen. The wild energy fluctuations started to stabilize, following new pathways that spiraled around the reactor core in perfect mathematical curves. Generator 12 online. Cascade is entering stable orbital configuration. The screaming alarms began to quiet as system after system came back online. Atmospheric pressure stabilized in the outer rings. Gravity generators resumed normal operation. The reactor core temperature dropped steadily as the exotic matter settled into its new patterns. This is impossible, whispered someone in the engineering bay. Core temperature nominal, Velna announced. Exotic matter flow stabilized. Containment integrity restored to full capacity. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The only sounds were the gentle hums of properly functioning equipment and the distant sigh of air circulation systems. Finally, Kwan's voice came over the communicator, shaken and confused. Status report. Are we stable? All systems operating within normal parameters, Suki replied, disbelief clear in her voice. The cascade has completely stopped. Reactor efficiency is actually higher than it was before the malfunction. How is that possible? Velna answered quietly. The orbital configuration of exotic matter creates more efficient energy transfer than the previous containment system. The reactor is now producing 12% more power while using the same fuel. Consumption. Word spread through the station within minutes. 50,000 beings had been facing death, and now they were not only safe, but had a more efficient power system than before. The news traveled through every corridor, every common area, every species enclave. The disabled Kothari who worked night shifts in data processing had just saved everyone's life. In the engineering bay, hardened professionals who had worked in space for decades stood around their displays, trying to understand what had just happened. Her being they had ignored, dismissed and pitied had solved a problem that had defeated all of them. Jiho smiled as he watched Velna carefully power down her modifications, her movements precise and professional. "You did it," he said simply. For the first time since he had known her, Velna smiled with complete confidence in herself. "We did it." 3 days after the reactor crisis, a Kothari transport ship docked at Nexus Station. Velna was working her regular shift when the message came through her personal communicator, a message she had not received in over 2 years. "Velna, this is your brother Thakmor. We have arrived to bring you home." Her hands froze over the sea. Holographic interface. Home. The word felt strange and painful. The mining colony where she had been born, where her own family had decided she was too broken to be worth keeping around. 20 minutes later, 3 tall Kothari entered the data processing center. Velna recognized them immediately. Her brother Thakmor, her sister Kirith, and her father Mordak. They looked exactly as she remembered, with their dark blue skin, powerful builds, and the confident way they moved through the world. "Little sister," Thakmor said, though his tone was not warm. "You have made quite a name for yourself." Velna did not move from her workstation. "What do you want? We heard about your contribution to the recent emergency," her father said, the word contribution sounding forced. "The family council has decided it is time for you to return to Korth." "Return? You mean the same Korth where you told me I was a burden? Where you said my defective body made me worthless to the family?" Kirith stepped forward. "That was different. We did not understand your capabilities then. My capabilities have not changed. I am the same person you abandoned. You have proven yourself useful," her father said bluntly. "The family can benefit from your skills now." Velna felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Useful. That is what this is about." "You have brought honor to the family name," Thakmor said. "Stories of your achievement have reached our home world. Other families are impressed that a Kothari solved what trained engineers could not." "Where were you when I needed you?" Velna's voice was growing stronger. "Where were you when I struggled to find work because no one would hire a defective Kothari? Where were you when I taught myself advanced physics because no school would accept me?" "We are here now," her father replied, as if that solved everything. "Pack your belongings. Our ship leaves in 4 hours. I'm not going anywhere." The 3 Kothari exchanged glances. They had clearly expected her to be grateful for their sudden interest. "Velna," Kirith said in a tone that was probably meant to sound caring, "you cannot stay here forever. This place is not your real home. These aliens are not your real family. They have shown me more acceptance in a few months than you did in 20 years. Because they did not know what you were capable of," Thakmor said. "Now that your value is proven, you belong with your own people." That was when Jiho walked into the data processing center. He took one look at the 3 tall Kothari standing around Velna's workstation and immediately understood what was happening. Everything. "Okay here," he asked, moving to stand beside Velna's chair. "This does not concern you, human," Mordak said dismissively. "We are here for our family member." "Funny thing about family," Jiho replied calmly. "Real family doesn't abandon someone when they need help, then show up to claim credit when that person succeeds on their own." "You do not understand Kothari culture," Thakmor said, his voice growing dangerous. "I understand that Velna has been taking care of herself just fine without you. She saved 50,000 lives using her own knowledge and skills, knowledge she gained because she never gave up on herself, even when everyone else did." Velna looked up at her brother. "Jiho is right. I learned everything I know because I had to, because none of you believed I was worth teaching or supporting." "We are offering you a chance to come home," her father said, frustration creeping into his voice. "This is my home now. These people value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. You would choose aliens over your own blood?" "I would choose people who cared about me, when I had nothing to offer over people who only want me now that I am famous. Jiho stepped closer to the Kothari. She's made her choice clear. I think it's time for you to respect that. This is not... Hova? Mordak said to Velna. You are still our daughter. You still have obligations to the family. My only obligation is to myself, Velna replied firmly. I owe you nothing. The three Kothari left without another word, their footsteps echoing angrily in the quiet room. Velna sat in silence for several minutes, staring at her hands. You okay? Jiho asked gently. For the first time in my life, I think I am, she said. They came here expecting to find the same broken person they left behind. But I am not that person anymore. No, you're not. You're the person who saved this station. You're the person who refused to let other people's limitations define you. Velna smiled, and for the first time, it was a smile of complete self-acceptance. They called me useful, but I am not useful. I am valuable. There is a difference. 6 months after the reactor crisis, Velna and Jiho stood in their new research facility, watching the latest transport ship dock at Nexus Station. Through the Ingdika observation windows, they could see dozens of beings with various disabilities stepping onto the station's platforms for the first time. That's the third transport this week, Jiho observed, making notes on his datapad. Word is really spreading. Look, thank them, Velna said softly, watching a young Nexari with damaged arm appendages talking excitedly to her family. They have hope in their eyes. I remember what that feels like. Their adaptive technology initiative had started small, just Velna, Jiho, and a few other engineers working on better mobility devices and communication systems, but as news of their work spread throughout the galaxy, funding and support had poured in from unexpected sources. The breakthrough had come when they developed universal neural interfaces that could adapt to any species' brain patterns. What started as a way to help Velna work more efficiently had become a tool that allowed beings with various disabilities to control technology through thought alone. The consortium approved our request for expansion, Jiho announced, checking his messages. They're giving us the entire research wing and funding for 50 new positions. 50? That means we can start the education program we discussed and the engineering apprenticeship track. We'll be able to train disabled individuals from across the galaxy in advanced technical skills. Their laboratory had become the heart of something much larger than they had ever imagined. The walls were lined with prototypes of adaptive devices for dozens of different species. Neural interfaces that helped beings with sensory impairments, mobility systems that worked in various gravitational environments, and communication tools that bridged the gap between species with different physical capabilities. But the technology was only part of what made Nexus Station special. The real change was in how people thought about disability itself. Velna's success had proven that physical limitations didn't determine intellectual capacity. Her team now included brilliant minds from across the galaxy, beings who had been overlooked or dismissed by their homeworlds, but who brought unique perspectives to complex problems. Senior Engineer Velna, came a voice behind them. They turned to see Talo, the blind Pip who had joined their team months earlier. His audio sensor expertise had revolutionized how they designed navigation systems. What is it, Talo? The delegation. From the Vektari Science Academy has arrived. They want to discuss establishing a sister facility on their home world. Velna and Jiho exchanged glances. The Vektari were known for their rigid hierarchies and conservative approaches to technology. If they were interested in adaptive research, it meant the movement was reaching even the most traditional societies. Tell them we'll meet with them in an hour, Velna replied, and ask Senna to prepare the mobility demonstration. Senna was a young human who had been born without legs but had become their lead designer for movement systems. Her innovations had helped beings across dozens of species regain independence they thought they had lost forever. As Talo left to make arrangements, Jiho moved closer to Velna's chair. Remember when you thought you were invisible? Now I sometimes wish I could be invisible again, she laughed. 3 interviews yesterday, 2 facility tours today, and that documentary crew following me around all week. The documentary is important. It will reach beings who have never imagined they could have opportunities like this. Through the observation windows, they watched more newcomers exploring the station. A Zephyrian with a damaged wing was being shown around by one of their staff members. Two young Korthari with various physical differences stood together, looking amazed at the bustling, inclusive environment around them. "You know what I love most about this place?" Velna said, watching the scene below. "What's that?" No one stares anymore. Not because they don't notice differences, but because differences are normal here, expected, even valued. It's becoming a model for other stations too. I got a message from Deep Space Station 7 asking for consultation on their accessibility upgrades. And the mining colonies want training programs for their disabled workers, Velna added. It turns out that beings with different physical capabilities often see solutions that others miss. A soft chime indicated their next appointment was arriving. As they prepared to meet with the Vektari delegation, Velna took one last look at the docking bay below. A small transport was arriving, different from the others. As the airlock opened, she saw a familiar sight. A young being in a mobility device, looking around nervously as family members guided them onto the station. "That could have been me 2 years ago," she said quietly. "What would you tell her if you could?" That she's not broken, that her mind is her greatest strength, and that somewhere in the galaxy there are people who will see her potential instead of her limitations. Jiho smiled. "Maybe you should tell her exactly that." "Maybe I will. After we change the galaxy, one mind at a time." As they headed to their meeting, the sounds of the bustling station filled the air around them. Conversations in dozens of languages, the hum of adaptive technology working seamlessly, and underneath it all, the quiet confidence of beings who had found a place where they truly belonged. Nexus Station had become more than a space station. It was proof that the universe was big enough for everyone, and that the greatest innovations came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes all it took was one human who believed that different was not the same as lesser, and one brilliant mind ready to show the galaxy what was possible. The future had never looked brighter. Yes, there is. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be part of your life, our lives.